Good morning, and thank you for keeping it Citizen Television. Of course, there is a lot that we had said we have lined up for you on the show this particular morning. We have an extended program. Of course, we want to discuss a very important subject in our country. Right now, there's a lot that is going on to really escalate the rates of, just people accessing family planning. And we want to go deeper into looking at how this is connected to matters development, matters poverty eradication, issues to do with even the overall well-being of mothers and children, even when you go ahead to look at the teen mothers and what family planning can actually do to be able to really help our young girls. And I have a panel that will be helping me discuss what Kenya has been able to do, of course, courtesy of even the partnerships we've had with other countries and other sponsors to achieve our goals when it comes to family planning and ensuring access to every mother in the smallest corner of this particular country. So allow me to introduce my guests for the show this particular morning. From my far right, I'm hosting Dr. Charlotte Pahe. She's Project Director, DESIP. DESIP is actually one of the biggest, projects that have taken a very lead role when it comes to family planning distribution in our country. And we'll talk about that in the course of this conversation. And we're also having Dr. Albert Ndwiga, Family Planning Program Manager. Thank you so much for creating time this morning. All right, so maybe just a basic way of beginning this conversation. I'll begin with you, Dr. Ndwiga. Why is it necessary for us to really begin to rethink our approach of family planning? If you look at the prospects it carries in our country, somebody would be asking, why is it important? Why is it a matter that we should be discussing? From where you sit, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very loaded question. Maybe I should take you back to when it started. The family planning program is one of the oldest programs in Kenya, established between 67 and 69. And the reason is because it is very closely tied to the development of the nation, because you want your population to grow at the same rate as your economic development. Because population has needs. It's not just the number of people. There are things that the population requires food, requires shelter, you need education, and so on. And at the family level, because that is the basic unit of our society, the family planning plays a very important role, even in health. So if we are to start there, if you look at the health of the mother, which is basically tied to the health of the family, pregnancy and childbirth takes a big toll on the mother's body. And they need time to recover. They need time to bond with the baby. They need time to do exclusive breastfeeding. So spacing births is crucial for the health of the mother. It is crucial for the health of the family. And that cannot happen without family planning. Secondly, when you look at the limited resources the families have, they need to plan their families. We do not want families that are accidental. We want families that are planned. People sit down, couples, spouses, or even individuals, and plan. How many children do we need? Do we want? How do we want to space them? When do we want to have them? That decisions once made can only be supported by the family planning program. We only come to support decisions that have already been made. On the other hand, we do education to increase demand for these services so that people understand why they are needed. So the reason why family planning program is so old is because no developing nation would develop without managing their population. And family planning is very important in population management.
All right.
And to add on to what you asked as a final part of the answer, is that the choices that we present, because you're asking what is new now, the choices that we present in the family planning programs are different from the past. We have newer choices of contraceptives. We have easier ways of administering them. We have better workforce, and so we are more efficient
compared to where we're coming. And we'll talk about the trends and what has been done to really make it easy, even in terms of options and in terms of access for women and families. And I like how you have made it sort of like a family issue. It's not a woman's issue, and how you have even connected it to issues to do with development and all that. It's not just about limiting the number of children that a family has, but by limiting that number, there is something that informs, that decision, and it has, things that we are achieving as a country as a result of that. And just to come to you, Dr. Pahe, if you look at where we're coming from before we go to where he was describing, I want us to talk about DESIP as a project, but before we get there, how did it used to be? What informed this intervention of us now really scaling up family planning in Kenya? How was the situation back then before we knew what we know now?
Okay. So picking up from where Dr. Ndwiga just stopped, so looking at the past, and in Kenya, I think it's about 2 or so years ago where we had the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey report for 2022 come out, and it was indicating and showing milestones between where we were during the previous report, I think it was 2014, and then with the 2022, and just comparing that journey. Some of the things that were highlighted was the drop in particular counties, some drop in the total fertility rate, in some actually an increase, in some a really low uptake of modern contraception methods. Dr. Ndwiga mentioned that methods are different, they vary. So traditionally we talk about, usually we talk about either traditional methods or modern contraceptives. And again, traditional methods are usually associated with high levels of failure. So we are looking at a time when populations particularly were having, a family would sometimes have more than 15 children, and particularly in communities that live in the arid and semi-arid lands, where resources are limited, where the climate and the weather conditions are not usually very friendly, so they travel with pasture. These are particularly pastoralist communities with large families, and that dynamic, being able to actually cater for pasture for their families within that setup was actually very difficult for them. We're also looking at a situation where, because a mother is not recovering fully, like Dr. Ndwiga is saying, then chances of her dying because of very quick succession of pregnancies, with these particular women tended not to have as good outcomes as women who had spaced their births and had enough time to fully recover. Again, their babies were not having as very good outcomes because another child would perhaps be born when this one is just weaned. So mom has to stop breastfeeding and now prepare for the next pregnancy. So we're seeing there's a difference actually in children, even in how they understand. These ones that are breastfed shortly and left so that another one can be catered for, their outcomes are different from those who are given at least 2 years, 18 months to 2 years before a subsequent child follows.
Now, borrowing from that background, Dr. what would you say, how has Kenya performed when it comes to family planning programs? Having that background that she has described, what have we done and how have we performed so far? What are some of the things that you can highlight for us?
Well, that question requires a bit of a technical answer. So going back to the 60s and 70s, there's an indicator that we use called total fertility rate, TFR. Total fertility rate is the average number of children per woman, put it simply. And in the 70s, when I was growing up, the average was about 8 children per mother. Now, if you look at today, and that was 2019 census, it was calculated at 3.4. So from 8 to 3.4, that's a major improvement.
That's like half, more than half.
More than half. And the reason is because, one, we have done a lot of work as the Ministry of Health and our partners to sensitize people on the need for family planning and the benefit of it. And over time, those results have been seen. The other indicators used, like modern contraceptive prevalence rate, which has been improving. The 2022 demographic survey, I think, came up with 57% of fecund women in Kenya using modern contraception, compared to previous years where it was much lower. So we are doing very well. so far. But of course, it doesn't mean we don't have challenges. We do have challenges. We can do better. Our 2030 target for modern contraceptive prevalence rate is 64%, up from 57. And you know, the higher it goes, the more difficult it becomes to improve. So we still have a big gap to cover, and that is what we're working on. For that reason, the Ministry of Health and our partners, we are looking at high-impact interventions, what we call HIPs, high-impact practices, to improve the uptake of family planning across the country, and more so in communities that have traditionally have low uptake. Usually when you look at arid and semi-arid areas, the pastoralist communities, and so on and so forth. And that is why DESIP has been very instrumental in helping us reach those communities, even underserved communities, to improve the uptake. And we've seen that happen. From the 2022 survey, we've seen a lot of those counties coming up.
All right.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the point that we wanted to discuss. This is like one of the biggest projects that we are having when it comes to family planning distribution in the country, DESIP.
Yes, yes.
Just take us into the depth of what it's all about, when it was initiated, what was the key objective then, and how have you run it? Was it 2019?
2019.
From 2019?
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. Thank you very much. So the DESIP project started in 2019. This DESIP, the word DESIP is an acronym, and it stands for Delivering Equitable and Sustainable Increases in Family Planning. So that equity part was very important. And like Dr. Ndwiga mentioned, really looking at families that were not having access to family planning in the past. If you look at Kenya, some counties tend to sort of have an urban-ish sort of outlook. They tend to be more, should I say favored? They're sort of better off in terms of access to information and access to services. So DESIP wanted to particularly focus on women of reproductive age, who we consider women to be between the ages of 15 years to 49 years. That's how WHO defines it. And wanted to make sure that these particular women are the ones who are reached, with a focus on those in rural and marginalized areas, with a focus on those in arid and semi-arid lands. And DESIP is so unique in that we now included an aspect we call social inclusion, where we began to include being deliberate with how we support services for people who are living with disabilities. Because you'd find that a woman who's living with a disability, when she gets to a facility, and first of all, matters of sexual reproductive health are personal, they're sensitive. She doesn't want to have an audience that people are screaming. Perhaps she has a disability in hearing or seeing, but now she's having to make that, she has to call another person to interpret for her. And if the interpretation is not accurate, then she's not going to get accurate services. And generally, in medical school and the medical schools that we have, that really isn't emphasized in training when we're coming up, such that we are not trained as much in that particular way to be sensitive to people who are living with disabilities. So you find us in the clinics, we're offering services, yet we are not trained in how to offer service for this particular cohort of people. So in addition to that, we did something called safeguarding, where we made sure that we were increasing messages so that communities and healthcare workers were protected from sexual violations, sexual harassment that is not welcome in any way. So the project was very large, the vision was very large for the project. Initially it started in 19 counties, but we experienced major funding cuts during the COVID period with the Ukraine war. The two of them sort of overlapped on each other. So we got a funding cut of almost 70%. Initially we were a number of 7 partners working together with the Ministry of Health through the Division of Reproductive and Maternal Health. And then we now ended up with about 2 to 3 partners year on year out, depending on the kind of scope. And the counties actually reduced from 19 counties to 12 counties. So that's how we generally worked, with a lot of support from the national government. Overall, we managed to work together with the government and other partners to work on some policies that were necessary in the country. We also managed to engage to catalyze particular discussions. We got an opportunity through the project, through what we call Output One, where we're increasing awareness and acceptance for family planning, to put in place what Dr. Ndwiga mentioned about high impact practices, where for particular communities, if you're talking about women in arid and semi-arid lands, you're looking at people who live within particular cultural contexts. You're not going to go find that community if you don't involve their men, because for those communities, their men are the gatekeepers. They're the ones who make decisions for that. So we found ourselves contextualizing based on the counties that we are in. In Samburu, for instance, in Turkana, for instance, in those counties, we implemented a model called Manyata model, or Under the Tree, where decisions in that community can only be passed by men during the sessions where they're under the tree. Only then can a healthcare worker get access to the women, to talk to them about any services that, the Ministry of Health is thinking about. So we also did engage a lot of religious leaders in northeastern and upper eastern counties. Those regions, their gatekeepers are their religious leaders. So they needed to see, is this thing really, is it going to harm us, or are we actually in the right place? And not only for religious leaders in terms of the Muslim aspect, but also the Christian as well. And again, we always advocate and say family planning doesn't stop you from getting the desired number of children that you want. It just allows you to space. Just space them so that you're growing at a rate, like Daktari said, your economies as a family is also matching up to the number of children that you're having. And as well, mom and baby are getting enough time to recoup before another child is added to the community. So we got a lot of acceptance doing that. We worked with the counties. We undertook an assessment at the beginning to see what facilities were missing. Some of them were missing equipment, some of them were missing job aids and checklists that help you deliver services. So once we were able to put together what the gaps were, we supported that availability of the infrastructure for the services to be offered. And then we worked again together with the Ministry of Health, especially in the counties and national government, for training.
Just to add something, who is the main implementing?
Absolutely.
You should say that.
Yes.
And how does it work?
And how does it work here? So, you know, in the spirit of partnership, usually, and you see it very well in communities where everybody has a value add that they bring to the table. So the DESIP project is implemented amongst, it was initially by 7 consortium partners, like I mentioned, with Population Services Kenya, commonly referred to as PS Kenya, being the prime, which is where I work. And then we had other partners at the time. We had AMREF Health Africa as one of our sub-recipients at the time. We had Faith to Action. We had Health Rights International. We had Options Consultancy. We had VSO, who particularly supported us on the making sure, we call it mainstreaming of interventions for people living with disabilities. They're an organization that particularly works with people who are living with disabilities. So they helped us include that in the program. Then Faith to Action worked with religious leaders across all boards to make sure that we're including them as well. AMREF Health Africa in Kenya helped us at that time with public service delivery. So we're a consortium of many partners, but PS Kenya was actually the prime. The project is funded by the UK government.
So Population Services.
Population Services Kenya is the prime, yes. And the donor is UKAID, UKAID through the FCDO. But the UK government is actually the donor, and actually work in partnership with what we call a third-party monitor. They're called HERA Consortium. What they do is that they give us an external eye. They're not part of the active consortium members, these ones, but they look at your data externally and verify that what you're doing is actually what you're reporting, what is true. And then we also currently are working together, are jointly funded with UNFPA. So sometimes we look at the gaps and we see that these particular commodities are missing, and then the donor then channels funds through UNFPA, and we get a donation of commodities. I think the last one that was donated was actually in the month of December, and I think we're actually expecting another consignment. So really a lot of partners came together to do the work, yes. But the project comes to an end this month.
So there's a lot of monitoring and
a lot of measuring, a lot of networking, absolutely. Because you can't consider yourself to be the one that knows everything. And I think sometimes the Ministry of Health is missed in how critical it is, because remember, they are the custodian of the health of the people of Kenya. They're the ones who own the mandate. We only come in because sometimes the budget, they operate within a very limited fiscal space. There's only so much stretching that they can do. So they look at a scenario and tell us, we have a need here. This is what we need to be done. So that is where we match them. We don't come up with interventions that are outside of the mandate of the Ministry of Health.
All right. Dr. Ndwiga, earlier you took us through the journey of family planning in Kenya and how we have experienced significant decline in the total fertility rates from what it was then, 8 point something to about 3 point something today. If you focus that forward, there is what we call the family planning 2030 goals. I want us to understand more about, in as much as we've come this far, this is where we want to go. These are the goals, these are the objectives before 2030. And how do we get there, Dr. What will it take for us to get to those objectives?
I'm happy to know that you know about the FP 2030 goals. It's what really informs what we do.
Yeah.
Because it is our medium-term plan. And every time we are doing our annual work plans, we are working towards meeting those goals. There are 8 goals, but to summarize for you, I've already mentioned one, where we want to move the modern contraceptive prevalence rate to 64% from 57. We also want, there's another indicator called the unmet need. And unmet need for family planning means somebody does not want to be pregnant now, maybe in the future, or maybe never. But they are not on any contraception. But they are, of course, engaged in sexual behavior. So such a person is considered to have an unmet need. And in the 2022 survey, when it was measured, it was said about 14%, actually 15% of women have an unmet need for family planning. And the goal by 2030 is to lower that to single digits, to below 9. And it's a kind of a paradoxical indicator in that if you educate people more, then unmet need goes up, because unmet need is predicated on the person knowing that they don't want to be pregnant, and there's a method they can use to stop it, but they are not using it. So that's one of the indicators. The other calamity we have in Kenya is teenage pregnancy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of girls who are getting pregnant. Samburu leads with 50%, but nationally I think it's about 15% of girls who become pregnant before they should. And that's something we want to reduce. There's also the goal of becoming sustainable domestically. We need about $20 million per year just to buy the contraceptives. We never come even close. And with a pull-out of the USAID, which for this year, we were expecting them to fund a quarter of that budget, then it's becoming more and more difficult. So we are looking at advocating for 100% domestic financing for family planning products, so that every person who needs the facility, the service, gets it, wherever they are. Because one of the biggest hindrances, and why there's so much inequity in Kenya as far as family planning is concerned, is because the products and equipment and facilities are not equitably available across the nation. So in a nutshell, those are our 2030 goals. What are we doing about it? We are advocating, right? And we're implementing the high impact practices that I talked about. Some of them include self-care, where we are training people to take care of their own contraceptive needs, up to and including injecting themselves instead of going to a health facility. You know,
get it done.
Get booked, get registered, pay the card, go to the injection room. You can save yourself a lot of time if you inject yourself at home.
But this will require a lot of awareness, creation, and advocacy,
and it's expensive.
for it to be done the right way.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
But we'll have to do it. I don't think we have an option.
There's no two ways around it.
If we are to achieve the 2030 goals that we've set for ourselves, we'll have to do it somehow.
There was one interesting, discussion that she brought when she was just sharing with us what they're doing on the ground. And in one particular community, I remember you mentioned you had to sort of like talk to the men first. Yeah? I don't know whether that is captured in the goals for 2030 as well, because I find it important to really have this family planning discussion with everybody on the table.
Absolutely.
Because having children is not just a woman's affair, and not having children is equally not.
It's called melding engagement,
Yes.
and it's a major part of the 8. In fact, we have 8 interventions.
All right, all right.
And even if people look at me and when I tell them I'm the family planning program manager, they doubt me because they don't look like it. And that is true.
Yeah.
Because men have been left out in the conversation. When family planning began, if I have my memory serves me right, it was women talking in hushed tones in the village.
Yeah.
I used to follow my mother a lot, so I know this. And for men, it was not an issue. But for now, one of our major interventions is ensuring men understand that they are part and parcel of it. And in fact, let me tell you today that the easiest method, once you've decided you've reached your reproductive goals, you don't want any more children. And that happens a lot, by the way, because if you look at the demographic survey of 2022, people who answered that they don't want any more children were more than 30%. So there is this intervention we call voluntary surgical contraception. And the easiest one to do is vasectomy, where the vas deferens of the men are cut and tied. It is done in an office. You don't need to be admitted. It's done under local anesthesia, and nobody has to know about it. And it removes the burden of the woman taking pills every day or having injections every now and then. And it's a method that, of course, is opposed. We need, I don't know why, but a lot of people think it interferes with their manliness, which it does not, by the way. So male involvement is a major component of what we want to do, because we cannot achieve the goals of family planning without men agreeing with us. In fact, it's the right thing to do for their families. And I don't know what is happening in Kenya, but the man is becoming, at least in my community, the man is becoming weaker and weaker as the head of the household. And I think in communities that are highly patriarchal, it is impossible to push a family planning agenda without the man.
Without the man. All right. So things are changing, and I wonder how, you know, Daktari, you're dealing with these issues that he's raising on the ground. The realities such as providing family planning services to our teen girls, the issues such as men now becoming part and parcel of, you know, the beneficiaries of family planning, the religious issues that are raised by certain religions when it comes to issues of family planning, and the myths and misconceptions. Before you implement this project, you have to deal with such complexities.
Absolutely.
Just take me through how you deal with those emerging challenges of acceptance and even understanding of family planning and how it's working out for your project.
Okay. So we'll start with the one for teenage pregnancies. So like Daktari mentioned, Kenya has a particular issue when it comes to that. But the law also has a guidance on who can be given family planning at which age group, and that is cut off at 18 years and above, because the law considers anyone else under that to be a minor. So there's a requirement for those who are of less than that age to either be accompanied. So I think this is where it gets tricky. So typically you would expect that to be a parent, but you live in societies that are different. There are some where a girl is married off, because teenage pregnancies don't always happen to a girl who is maybe got pregnant in school and had a boyfriend. Sometimes it's happening in a context where she's married. So the other side of the law would say, no. The constitution would say, no, a girl cannot be married at 13, but our cultural or our religious inclination is that a girl can get married after she's seen her first period. So she could get pregnant at 15, she could get pregnant at 14. So at that point, then the person you need to educate, because if it's that culture, it's happening, then the person you definitely have to work with would be the spouse. And a lot of times together with the mother-in-law, because the decisions of that home go together. Otherwise, we've seen in communities where the man standing together with his wife, actually goes through being ostracized because it is said his wife has either bewitched him, because how is he listening to this kind
woman.
of, yes, this woman. So so you find that the audience, you literally have to map the audience across each of these beneficiaries that you have. So you have to identify the entire scope of them and then involve them in the discussions. And then also have an open discussion about it. What are these things that we've heard about? What are the myths and misconceptions? Sometimes you talk about the adverse events, the side effects. So, and these are hormones sometimes for the modern ones that are being administered. So usually during FP counseling for uptake, there'll be a session where you'll be told, because this is this hormone at this dosage, this is what you're expecting you will experience. And it takes, and women receive different FP methods differently. 10 women could react to the same thing, could react to the pill very differently. So ideally, we want a woman to settle for a choice that works across different things. You don't want her to bleed too much. You don't want her to be on a method that makes her bleed too much, or one that makes her not see her menses, or one that makes gives her trouble returning to fertility when she desires to have children. All we're looking at is her and her husband are planning together so that the family is sorted out together. In terms of, so what we do there, we do something called social behavior change, and which we sit with communities, understand where they're coming from. Then based on the resources that they have and where they are, we co-create solutions that work with them. That's how come in a particular setup, you'll need someone to give you, the religious leader, to actually believe. We've seen some religious leaders who say, okay, according to this, to the Quran, I hope I'm not quoting it wrong, a mother should at least be able to allow to breastfeed until her baby is 18 months. So then here we have guidance. So I'm not feeling like if I take up a method, I have gone out of my religious persuasion. So those kind of things, if I then, has my spouse been involved, for instance, if it's an issue of where permission has to come from a spouse, so then I don't feel like I have to hide, because if a woman has to hide, then the method she won't be able to do it for long. I remember one time when I was practicing somewhere and a lady was struggling. She wasn't comfortable with having more children, and her husband wanted a bit more, so she was hiding her FP card, and in between she conceived. So when I met her, she said to me, something is wrong with my tummy. It's growing big, and because she's told me she's on FP, I thought, okay, then she's probably maybe something else, maybe a fibroid. It was twins, and we were at 7 to the 8th month of pregnancy, and she was devastated because of that. But when I looked at her card is when I realized her dates were not consistent. She wasn't, but it's because she was also doing it in secrecy.
Yeah.
And I got an opportunity to listen to the previous discussion that was here, and I was thinking, I think the marriage setup doesn't allow for that much secret. For someone you live with daily, you may want to have the comfort of making that decision, like Dr. Adi said, openly as a family and doing it together.
Yeah. Dr. If you look at, the place of advocacy and how it has helped in realizing success when it comes to family planning, what would you say? Because these issues she's talking about would equally easily be solved if there was a lot of advocacy that is being done and awareness creation.
You're right. And let me take you back to, we keep referring to the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey that was done in 2022. Because it's very important. That's a very important document to refer to. And the county that had the highest uptake of family planning was Embu. Incidentally, I happened to come from there. But it was not always like that. My mother did not have 3.5 children. She had about 14, if the count is correct. But what really happened, there was a lot of information. Information to the people is very important. It empowers them. And one biggest intervention that helps is education. Where adult literacy rates are high, you will not struggle convincing them family planning is an important thing in their life. Where we have very low literacy levels, you'll struggle, regardless of the culture, regardless of the religion. I mean, look at Morocco, for instance. Morocco is almost 100% Muslim. They have a lower total fertility rate than us. Italy is nearly 100% Catholic. They have a lower total fertility rate than Kenya. Obviously, they are not doing natural methods. So education is key. If we can educate our population, let them go to school, the girls go to school, and beyond primary school, you will not need a lot of work to convince them family planning works. And it's important in their lives, because it's something they can see for themselves. However, we do not have the luxury of having everybody going to school to that level. And therefore, a lot of, not just advocacy, because when you talk about advocacy, it means, sorry, it means there's an advocate, like a lawyer, who is advocating to someone on behalf of someone. So we advocate to the government for resources to buy contraceptives. So we are advocating for the client to the government. We also advocate to the leaders, the community leaders, to make it easy, to have a better environment for family planning uptake. And make it easier even for community health promoters to pass on the information and so on.
So you're calling for the goodwill of the leaders, both local and even national?
Yes.
Yeah.
On top of that, we do a lot of education directly to the population. We talk to them. We use media like today. We also use job aids. We use, pamphlets and so on to educate. But we are not adequately resourced to do that. And if we had partners who are able to reach everyone with this information, transcending even the language barrier, so that they give the information in a language that is comfortable to the person who is listening. The reason why you have so many radio stations with different languages, people feel at home when they are told this in their own language.
The language they can understand.
So that's one of our high impact practices. We are not there yet. We need to do more, but that is what we are advocating. That's what we are doing. Yeah.
But so far, what critical partnerships would you say you've rode on that has propelled you to where you are today as a ministry?
That's a very good question, because I would like to tell you that family planning is not a health issue. The reason why it is in the family planning program is in the Ministry of Health is because contraceptives are drugs. But it's a development issue. So we have a partnership.
Good way to look at it.
Yes, we have a very close partnership with the National Council for Population and Development, which I believe is in the Ministry of Finance. And they do most of our advocacy for us because it's a major component of their population management agenda. And we also have partners like DESIP, who are able to go to areas that are hard to reach. And we do a lot of capacity building with them. We capacity build the community health promoters, the healthcare workers, the community leaders, the religious leaders, so that every context of the community is covered. So we also have partnership with the county governments through the Council of Governors. We don't enter a county without them. And specifically, we have officers called reproductive health coordinators, county reproductive health coordinators, who we liaise with directly for these interventions to reach the people. That the governance structure of the family planning program includes also a technical working group that in it you'll find professional bodies, you'll find academia, you'll find implementing partners like DESIP, UNFP and other donors are also there, including the Clinton Health and so on. And when that group meets, it makes a lot of decisions on behalf of the program. So we partner a lot.
All right. So it's not a one-man show.
It's not something that we do on our own.
Yeah.
And in any case, I don't think we can. now.
Even if you wanted to. That has really like sort of like raised a question I will ask you later when we are just almost winding up. But just coming back to you, DESIP as a program.
Yes, yes.
What I asked him about advocacy and awareness creation is just one of your biggest outputs.
Absolutely.
That's not the only thing.
That's not the only thing.
Probably just run us through, you know, the other outputs and what your targets are, you know, in implementing this program on the ground.
Thank you. So we actually, we have a theory of change framework, but overall it comes down to 4 main ways within which we call them outputs, 4 ways within which we implement our program. So the first one is around increasing awareness and acceptance for FP, which is mostly what we talk about, because if you sort out number 1, everything else becomes very easy. So that's where the high impact practices come in. Male engagement happens there. Engagement of religious leaders happen there. Talking to youth and communities, involving community health promoters, all of that happens at that larger umbrella of the increasing awareness and acceptance for family planning. Then our second output is around increasing availability for the service itself. So now you listened to the message at the community and you're in agreement, you need the service. So you don't want to get to a facility and there is no, the person there does not have the bed. So perhaps you need the privacy for the method to be administered and you're in broad daylight. Everyone in the community is watching you. So you're not comfortable and then your journey then terminates there. So what DESIP did with the output 2 was to make sure that services were actually available. So that's what I mentioned, that we did assessments at the beginning to see what gaps were there around infrastructure and tools, and then we actually supported provision of the same. So for some facilities, we were buying the beds, we were helping them set up. In fact, even for facilities where we wanted to increase access for people with disabilities, there's some way of help them separate a place for ramps so that people who are on wheelchairs could easily move up and have services. So really our output 2 did a lot to make sure that when you get to the facility, then it's available. Then now it's there and it's available. Is it quality? Or are you meeting someone who's never really, doesn't know what FP is all about? Our medical training sometimes it's not able to do everything for us. Sorry, that's why we go for internship, that's why we go through mentorship, that's why you'll see even for doctors, the medical board requires that we renew our licenses every year, so training is so critical. So output 3, we work with the national team that's led by Dr. Ndwiga and Dr. Serem, and they're our master TOTs. They're the ones who make sure that we remain within guidelines. That guidelines, first of all, are renewed, they're updated so that they match global current practice, and then together with them, we now cascade this training to health facilities. And then there's the fourth one around what he's mentioned about financing. You can only be supported by a donor so far. Perhaps they can work with you a journey of 5 years, 6 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20. But at a particular point, their support begins to come down as yours takes a steady approach at increasing, so that to a larger extent, or to some extent, at least a feasible one, you're able to provide for those services internally as a country and not depend on an external donor, because we've seen what has happened when one person has pulled out and the rest of us are thinking, okay, so what's going to happen to the rest of the country? So that's overall. But then we also work through the counties, like Dr. mentioned, the national program. We work together with NCPD. So we have this other approach where we call it cross-cutting, where we touch different pillars within the structures of the Ministry of Health and the government to make sure that we are also aligned to that. And then, like I mentioned, overall, the safeguarding, where we increase messaging and awareness for communities and healthcare workers not to be perpetrators of sexual harassment to each other, and then as well as support for people living with disabilities. So overall, we've reached, there's a term we call couple layers of protection. I think the technical terms Dr. was talking about, essentially, I'll say it the way I usually break it down in my head, that's easier. It's different from how the book says it. The book says many things, but essentially it's the protection, we'll call it protection, that a couple gets from a particular method. So for instance, if a couple took up the coil, and it's supposed to be for 10 years, so you're looking at a longer CYP as opposed to a couple where the lady is injecting. So she's having to go very frequently, yes. So for that, we had a target to reach about 2.2, to offer about 2.5 million. We were actually able to supersede that at 3.2 couple layers of protection. The most prepared method is actually the depot. I think women also find it discreet. They're able, as they're engaging their spouses and on how to use the method. If they're not so sure about acceptance, sometimes the depot is actually easier to go for. I find that for communities where a couple is agreed, the implant tends to be a bit more preferred. It gives them longevity. So for 3 years, you're okay before you come back. Then we had more than 300,000 actually additional users who started on FP just because DESIP came. But overall, we call them impact indicators, where maternal mortality actually reduces because this woman did not get pregnant too soon. She didn't have too many health issues during her complications, so she's alive. And we actually looked at the data, and we averted more than 2,500 deaths for women just from making sure that family planning is available. So, and then we've of course partnered with many stakeholders in this space. We've released a lot of documents, and to make sure what we are doing continues to happen even beyond the life of the project, we've disseminated, we've packaged the material in many different ways. We've prepared a document called the FP Compendium. It's documenting what DESIP did in every county. We've done that together with the Council of Governors. So if anyone ever landed there and wondered, where do I start? The model we talked about under the tree model with men, they'll find it in the Samburu chapter. If they're looking at what did DESIP do in Narok, how do they engage the male leaders, they'll find it in that particular chapter. So we've worked a lot with the ministry to make sure that material is disseminated so that anyone who comes in can continue, and to the extent that the counties and the national government can sustain, then they're able to use the material.
So there's continuity, and they can build on
and they can build on what is already achieved.
So
yes.
far. All right. So as we wind up, I'll not have done us justice by not asking this question. I know the UK government is playing a very key role in supporting such initiatives, but we are seeing what is happening currently in the donor space. I don't know what your thoughts would be, with regards to, so what's the next way forward, in the event that probably in the near future, the UK government decides to either reduce or withdraw, like the US. Does that mean that we reverse the gains that we have all discussed this morning? Let me begin with you, Dr. Ndwiga. Do we lose everything, or we have a game plan already?
That's a question that keeps me awake at night because there was not an unforeseen. Donor pullout is not something that happened suddenly out of the blues. It was known. In fact, there are memorandum of understanding showing pullout with the dates like 2026 that I've seen. So it was going to happen. It was
not meant to be a surprise.
It was not a surprise. But you see, the only option we have is domestic financing, using our own resources to, as I said, from our own calculations, we need about $20 million per year to buy the products. And that translates to about 2.6 billion shillings. Somehow we'll have to find it because if we don't do that, then there will be a lot of people who will not access services. When it comes to capacity building, we have trained a lot of people. And right now, although I know we can do more, I'm comfortable that the numbers we have can push us for a few years. We're also thinking about taking the curriculum to pre-service, training the person before they graduate, so that by the time they come to graduate, they are family planning ready. They can offer the service, they don't need further training. And the facility is also, family planning is a very basic service. It's offered from level 1. So it's not complicated. Again, the innovations that is coming is to make it easier and easier to deliver the service so that you can do it even at home, right? That's what we call self-care. Because that service has to be sustained somehow. So the innovations we have, whether they are donors or not, because it impacts on our development as a country. So the advocacy has to continue so that we have 100% domestic financing, and we also have to continue the program with the resources that will be there.
Daktari, your call to action as we wind up, you get the final word.
So I think what I would look at, if I look at Kenya right now, and I had an opportunity, perhaps I in a dreamland or in a fantasy land, I had the ear of the leaders, and I was looking at the country as it is. With the DRMH and with the MOH, we have a lot of goodwill, but we really need, I think Kenya really needs to reprioritize. If when families face a challenge, or when someone gets a job loss that is sudden, we see families quickly they prioritize. You see sometimes families decide, I cannot live in town, let me move back up country. And decisions are made very quickly. So I think Kenya as a country, we really need to look at our own resources and say, okay, what do we want to do that is really nice to do, but we cannot afford it right now? Because if we ignore the issue about family planning and think that it was a donor's priority, everything that we've looked at, and particularly maternal mortalities, which are very painful for healthcare workers. It is very painful and very traumatic for healthcare workers to sit there and they've done everything and they've lost a mother. So we don't want to see those gains reversed. So my call to action would be for leaders to really sit down and reprioritize. If there are things that could wait, so that we make sure that this 20 million that's required, the $20 million is made available. Particularly, like Dr. says, we've sustained capacity to an extent. There's some amount of awareness which we can build on. We have the community health strategy. CHPs can do some amount of awareness. So commodities become our next critical issue. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm really pressed for time, but allow me to put a comma there. This conversation cannot be concluded. Of course, I hope that you'll pick it up and you will continue having it wherever you're watching us from, because it is not a one-man's show like we have agreed here on the program. It takes all of us to be able to be part and parcel of this very great conversation that, like Dr. Ndwiga is putting, is not a health issue. It's actually a development issue, and we really need to change our linear approach to family planning. Thank you so much for creating time this morning. I've been engaging Dr. Charlotte Pahe. She is a DESIP project director. DESIP is just delivering equitable and sustainable increases in family planning, a project that is run by the Population Services Kenya. And of course, I've also been engaging Dr. Albert Ndwiga, Family Planning Program Manager under the Ministry of Health. Thank you so much, both of you, for creating time for us this particular morning. And thank you for watching Daybreak. Since you woke up with us until now, we do not take your time and company for granted. Allow us to wrap it up there. Enjoy the rest of your day, and of course, enjoy the rest of your viewing.